Okay, so current students, thanks for minding the waiting room as people come in. That would be great. So welcome everybody. We are super excited that you're here tonight. Thanks for putting in where you're from in the chat. We love to see that, because if you are doing virtual school like we're doing online classes and Zoom meetings and everything else, it provides at least some amount of interaction. But definitely fill out the form if you're a student. Keep your microphones muted, but you're welcome to have your video on. Use the chat feature at any time for questions, because I've got 4 current students on here who can answer them. And after I go through a brief presentation, I'm going to turn it over to our current students and let them introduce themselves. And then you guys can do an open forum question and answer, either for me or for the students. Those can be submitted in the chat, or they can be, said video on, video off, your choice. So like I said earlier, my name is Jennifer Piercy, and I'm very excited that you guys are here. I am the Director of Recruiting for NC State's Paper Science and Engineering program. I'm also an alumnus of NC State with degrees in chemical engineering and pulp and paper technology. I worked in the paper industry for Procter & Gamble in their tissue manufacturing, which at the time was Charmin toilet paper, and also Bounty paper towel. And I'm excited to be at NC State because this is a role where I can share my love of our program and our industry and work with high school students, our current students, and then also I work with our alumni and our corporate partners that you'll hear about tonight. So our program truly is a different type of program. We're excited that you're taking the opportunity to learn about it. Maybe you've already applied to NC State. Maybe you're thinking about it. Maybe you're a freshman, sophomore, or junior in high school. But we'll talk a little bit about how our program is good for you, for the United States, for the environment, yes, the environment, and the future. Now, you can put questions in the chat, and trust me, there is not a question you can ask that either Daniel, Claudia, Brianda, Andrew, or myself have not heard before, and it won't offend us, because people say, good for the environment, but you're cutting down trees to make paper. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. But first, I'd like to start with what is engineering, because one of the most common questions I get is I can't decide between chemistry and chemical engineering, and they're 2 very different things. So engineering is the science, skill, and profession of taking scientific and practical knowledge and applying it so that you can design and build structures, machines, products, materials, systems. So think about everything that you would use in a daily basis. Medicine, apparel, from textiles, furniture, airplanes, bridges, paper products, and all the things that paper products would be in. So a chemist is going to go into the lab and find solutions, but there's not necessarily an application phase there. The engineer is going to take those facts and apply them. And a really good example that I love to get, and hopefully I've got somewhat of a mixed crowd with some parents joining in. If I were to ask parents who are about my age, how many of us had the chicken pox? It is about 98 to 99% of the people who will raise their hand. But if I ask the students, of those of you on the call tonight, who has had chicken pox, it's probably 1 or 2% of you. So what happened between me and you guys? It was a vaccine, right? So what I call an IST, either a biologist, a chemist, or some scientist discovered in a lab on a molecular level that doing A we could have a vaccine and not have chickenpox anymore. But you need that engineer to say, okay, so how are we going to produce this vaccine? What's required? How are we going to ship it? How are we going to store it? And what's its shelf life? Does it need to be refrigerated? All these things, and then design and build the processes and systems to manufacture that vaccine and get it to the masses. So that's kind of the difference. And if you're thinking about engineering, you probably know about the broad branches. So mechanical, chemical, electrical, the ones that are here on this screen that are usually very popular and well known. And we'll take just a little bit of a deeper dive into chemical engineering because that's the one we are most closely related to. So chemical engineers take chemical reactions, fluid, mass, momentum, and heat, flow and transfer, and thermodynamics to build systems that will move, transform, and react matter. So we'll talk a little bit about, you start with a tree, which is a raw material, renewable, sustainable matter. And then in 8 hours, you have a sheet of very flexible paper. So we have reacted, we've transformed, we've moved, we've used energy in that process. And so within chemical engineering, there are some specializations where we'll utilize those skills. So pharmaceuticals is a good example, petrochemical, and pulp and paper is where paper science and engineering at NC State falls in. So we are a very unique program on NC State's campus. So NC State has, in the umbrella underneath NC State, there are colleges, and our program happens to be co-administered by 2 colleges, the College of Engineering and the College of Natural Resources. And usually what I tell students is think of your 2 most favorite places you've ever visited, whether they're inside of North Carolina or the US or international. And if you could be a citizen of both of those places, that's what our program is like. So the College of Engineering, for students that are in state, that's what NC State is known for, engineering and agriculture and life sciences. We have about 10,000 undergrad and graduate students in our College of Engineering, 18 different degrees that you can get undergrad for engineering. 3 of those do happen to be co-administered by 2 colleges. We have our own Centennial campus, and our chemical engineering program is actually ranked 20th in the world. By comparison, our College of Natural Resources is about 1/10 the size, maybe a little more, so 1,400 students, $600,000 in scholarships awarded annually, study abroad programs. 100% of our students in the College of Natural Resources must complete an internship or a co-op to graduate. We are the 6th ranked college in the US for natural resources, and our paper science and engineering program is #1 in North America and #7 in the world. So I always like to tell folks a little bit about why paper, because most people say, ooh, you need a degree for that. But each person on this call uses close to 600 pounds of paper a year. And we like to say that paper keeps us civilized. It contributes more than $250 billion to the US economy. It's a major employer in many states, especially in the Southeast, paying some of the highest salaries. The US is the #2 paper producer in the world. If you think you know the #1 paper producer, you can put it in the chat. And we make products that help people be comfortable, prosperous, and educated. So paper makes us civilized. That's a good guess. Brazil's a good guess. Yes, China. So one of the things you think about China that drives up their paper production is their population. So think about all the things of paper that are disposable and recyclable and single use. So toilet paper, paper bags, food packaging, diapers, feminine hygiene, adult incontinence products. So things that we use more of if we have more people. So think about comfort and cleanliness. Again, I used to work in a manufacturing facility that made Charmin toilet paper, White Cloud toilet paper, and Bounty paper towels, along with Pampers and Love's diapers. Convenience, communication, commerce. So a lot of times students will say, well, the paper that I write on, I just don't do that as much, right? So definitely students these days do not write on copy paper or lined paper, what we call uncoated free sheet, like my generation did. However, there is paper in your LCD TV screens, cell phones, and if you think about what your food is packaged in, after this, take a look in your pantry cupboards and your refrigerator. It is one of 2 raw materials. It's either paper or plastic. One is renewable, sustainable, recyclable, the other not quite as much. So the history of our program's not new. I get that a lot. I haven't heard of it. It must be new. We're over 65 years old, graduate about 30 to 40 students annually. We became ABET accredited engineering degree in 2004. And we have 40 directors on our advisory board that support, direct, and guide us. So I'm also hopeful that these next elements I'm going to talk to you about not only pique your interest in our program, because that's of course why we're here, but also maybe give you some things to think about as you're in that college and program search. So one of the things that the students will tell you they really love about our program is we are a small program with individual attention. One of the number one concerns I get from parents is my child going to be a number at NC State? Over 25,000 undergraduate students. But remember, we have our College of Engineering that's 10,000 students, our College of Natural Resources that's 1,400, and our paper science program that's 200. So that creates that family feel with a high degree of faculty to student interactions, a low student faculty ratio, professional development, and wonderful industry support that the students can talk a little bit about. We do a freshman retreat every year, and yes, this year was different, but we did a part socially distanced in person and part virtual freshman retreat where our students got to see a modern paper manufacturing facility via aerial drone footage virtually. And we had a company feed them all their lunch, and we got to do some in-person and some virtual team building. Also hands-on learning. We have got 51,000 square feet of classroom, lab, and pilot plant space. At the end of this presentation, I'll give you a couple of links to research more about our industry and our program, and everything that you would find, almost everything, in a modern manufacturing facility, we have in our building just in a smaller size. We are really committed to taking the theory that our students learn every year in the classroom, that engineering theory, and putting it into real world practice. And this is a picture of our Wolfpack baby paper machine that's 12 inches wide, making some red paper. Another thing that we are the only program in the US to offer is a dual degree with chemical engineering. So about 65% of our students do this. It requires one extra semester. And again, at the end of the road, a dual degree student, chemi, paper science, and a single degree paper science, we see the same number of job offers, the same starting salary. Really, the difference is going to be the diversity of those offers. So the dual degree student will have a more diverse set of job offers for their first job only. But after that, an engineer is based on the work that they did in that first job. So we have had students that have started in the paper industry and transitioned out and back in. And it definitely, with an engineering degree, you can do just about anything. So again, I talked about the need for an internship to graduate. Now, hear me say that everything our students do is paid. It doesn't matter what it's called. So whether it's an internship, which usually happens in the summer, a co-op, which typically happens in place of a semester at school, or a super co-op, which is the two put together, they are all paid. We have in-house career services where our students sign up via Google Sheets. Companies will typically come in the night before, do a presentation, buy dinner for our students, and the next day they will interview our students. And our average student is graduating with about 8 to 10 months of experience, and some of them even more. And these are highly paid internships, as you can tell by some of the data on the slide. Our full-time job placement is nearly 100%. Now, we say 90 to 100% at 6 months of graduation. That's how universities report it, 6 months of graduation. But for the parents that are on the call, I will tell you, I have a high school senior and a college junior myself. And my college junior, I don't want her not having a job for the first 6 months after graduation, right? I want her having a job when she walks across that stage. And that's the way we feel about our students. So we really try to help facilitate that 100% job placement at graduation day. So some types of jobs that our students will do, about 70% of our students will go into the paper industry of our graduates. About 20% will do what we call engineering other, and I'll show you some companies in a minute. And then 10% we call really other, so graduate school, divinity school, mission field, things like that. And of those 70% that go in the paper industry, the majority of those, so 2/3 of those, will go into manufacturing, doing jobs like process engineering. So making that process, and the way I like to describe it is cheaper, faster, better, stronger, or safer, either for the consumer who's purchasing those goods, the company, or the environment. So constantly working on lower cost, improved efficiencies, less environmental impact in that process engineering. Now, project engineering is usually something like equipment installation or rebuilds or things that have finite start and end times, or you could be doing a combination of the two. Now, the other third of our graduates will typically work for a company that we call an allied industry. So that's a company that will provide chemicals, equipment, consulting, or other raw materials to the paper industry. Oftentimes people think sales, how can an engineer do sales? But these are very consultative roles. So technical consultation, account management, and also sales. But we do also have students that will go to consulting engineering. A lot of our alumni end up in management roles, research and development, graduate school. I can tell you that an engineering degree will prepare you for medical school, dental school, orthodontic school, law school, divinity school. Some of our paper science and engineering students have done those for sure. So companies that hire, there's some companies on here that you would notice, large paper companies like International Paper, Westrock, Domtar Papers. Some of our consumer goods products like Procter & Gamble and Kimberly-Clark, who do tissue towel and diapers. Rayonier Advanced Materials, who does specialty cellulose that ends up in your toothpaste. Syrup for your pancakes. I know, I can see some of y'all's expressions. Ice cream, screwdriver handles, toothbrush handles, tire cords, like the tires on your car. So specialty cellulose, LCD TV screens, and cell phones, a ton of applications. Nestle Purina, Anheuser-Busch. So food and beverage is a wonderful place for engineers. And then things like the US Patent Office or the Research Triangle Institute. Another thing that's interesting about our degree is we have the highest starting salary coming out of the College of Engineering and probably the university for our degree, single degree or dual degree. Now, I always preface this with saying, no amount of money is worth doing something that you do not like for the rest of your life. Therefore, NC State's engineering first year program is great at helping you trying to discern what might be your best career fit. And that is really our goal for you, is to find out the career fit for you. And then there's special opportunities. So international internships and co-ops, working in our department, undergraduate research with PSE professors. And we also have tried to impart some globalization on our students with our Paper International Experience trip, which happens every other year. And you can see some of the destinations where we have taken students in the past to learn about an industry that's different than the US and how we can compete with that and what we can reapply. So not only do we do work-related things like visit paper companies, learn about their technology, meet their engineers, but we also do fun things like immersing ourselves in the culture, learning about the history of the country, sightseeing, food, all that stuff. And then probably one of the reasons that you might be on here tonight, and I say this when we formerly could have in-person visits, and typically the students thought, you know, I can't believe she knows this, but it might have been that your mom, dad, you know, someone who received this email said, you are going to pay attention to this because they said the word scholarships. So that's what happened to me. My parents said, you're at least going to take a look at it because they have scholarships. So we do have one of the largest scholarship endowments at NC State. About half of our students are on scholarship. We have foundation scholarships ranging to $2,500 a year to $5,000 a year and more, plus some special scholarships through our technical association, merit-based, need-based, and beyond. And then, we talked a little bit earlier at the beginning about the environment. So, what is the future? So our raw material is totally renewable and sustainable. It's just, if you drive down the interstate, say maybe I-40 going east or west of Raleigh, it doesn't matter, and you see a wheat field or a corn field that has been harvested, you don't think anything of it. But if you see a tree stand that's been harvested, your immediate reaction is a negative one to say, oh my gosh, they cut down all those trees. Now, not every industry is as responsible, but for us, sustainable forestry is super important, or we wouldn't have an industry to begin with. So somebody's mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, aunt, uncle, their crop are trees, and they use that to make a living. Unfortunately, there's about a 20-year maturation rate. So until we can get as good as Brazil with their eucalyptus, but they are replanted, they are renewable, and we are growing our trees at a more rapid rate than we're using them, and they come from the air, right? So tree growth and photosynthesis is amazing. So our department is actually called the Department of Forest Biomaterials. So some of the research that goes on is turning biomass, anything that can be grown renewably and responsibly, into fuel, energy, plastic, structures, chemicals, and pharmaceuticals. And I love to tell the story of a young man who just graduated in May. I met him when he was a high school junior, and we kind of began a relationship. I met his parents. We were talking about what his career goals were. And at that time, we had no clue that just 3 years later, he would embark upon research in our department that uses fibers from banana trees to put them in absorbent materials like feminine hygiene products and baby diapers, or to make paper out of those banana fibers, use that paper to put crop seeds in Africa, and increase yield 400%. So some students say, yeah, paper, if you're thinking about paper, you're right on. I don't know, that doesn't sound super exciting. But solving problems like countries that don't have baby diapers or feminine hygiene products, or a 400% increase in crop yield, where we're on our third round of the Gates Foundation funding, that is something to get super excited about. So that's what the future is about. And then just a couple of logistics. If you are a high school senior, November 1st is the early application deadline for NC State. Please, 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 November 1st. November 1st, early action applicants are offered priority consideration for scholarships. That is why I want you to apply by then. Also, we'll put the links in the chat, but our Go link there has a YouTube channel with a link to virtual tours. It has my contact information. Pre-COVID, we had a wonderful visitation process with in-person tours and have lunch with a student. And we are doing our best to replicate that in a virtual world. So please feel free to reach out to me. And I'll just leave my contact information up here. I'll also put it in the chat. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it over to our students, starting with Claudia first. And they're just going to tell you a little bit about their experiences. And once Claudia, then Daniel, then Brianda, then Andrew go, we'll open it up for question and answer. Thank you guys very much. All right, Claudia.
Hi guys, so my name is Claudia Patterson. I am a senior in paper science engineering and chemical engineering, so I did the dual degree program. I am from Salisbury, North Carolina, so I saw a couple people from Mooresville and China Grove, so I'm from near there. While at school, I've been involved in the Student Wolfpack Club, love athletic events. I was the president of Dance Marathon at NC State. our student organization with paper science. So TAPI, I was part of that, as well as a couple other organizations. Um, and at state, I also teach group fitness, which is super fun. And I work as a pre-editor in the Bioresources Journal with the paper science staff as well. And then with my paper science experience, I've spent 2 summers with International Paper in Riegelwood. That is a fluff pulp mill outside of Wilmington, North Carolina. And then I spent last summer with Solenis working in chemical sales outside of Asheville. So upon graduation on December 4th, I will be starting my full-time job with Solenis in sales in Asheville. So that's super exciting. And what I like the most about paper science and NC State um, is just the community atmosphere. I think NC State has a really cool culture anyway. And then paper science just makes everything more tight knit. You know everyone in your classes, you know your professors, they come to your group fitness classes sometimes, and it's just a really great group of people.
Hey everyone, I'm Daniel Lucas. I'm a senior graduating December 2021, and I'm from Winston-Salem, North Carolina. I'm majoring in chemical engineering and paper science and engineering, doing the dual degree program, and I'm also minoring in business administration. I'm an officer in TAPI, which is our student paper science organization, and Andrew is the president, so he can tell you all about that. I also play trombone in the pep band for basketball at NC State, and I was in the marching band my freshman year. I've had 2 internships at the International Paper Georgetown, South Carolina mill. One was a co-op in the fall of 2018, and then I also went back there the following summer. This past summer, I was at International Paper's Savannah, Georgia mill, and I'm probably going back there again next summer. One of my favorite things about the paper science program is that you get to take a lot of practical classes that really directly apply to what you'd be doing out at a paper mill or any type of process engineering job, or really a lot of types of jobs you would go into. A lot of other classes you would take around NC State and in engineering are really theoretical, and they're good to know and they're really good classes, but they aren't as directly applicable in the same way as some of the paper science classes are. And we have a lot of really good labs that are really hands-on and teach you a lot about what you would see out in the field. So I think it's a really good program for letting you learn a lot about what you'll really be doing out when you get a job.
Hey guys, I am Brianna Sneed. I am a graduating senior in the paper science and engineering program. I'm majoring in paper science and engineering. I have a minor in business administration and chemical engineering. I'm from Charlotte, North Carolina, actually from Charlotte. I've been involved in a lot of different things on campus in my 4.5 years, mainly with Greek life and different engineering activities. So like College of Engineering Ambassador, TAPI as well, the National Society of Black Engineers. I've been involved in all of those things. I've had, I guess, 4 work experiences so far. I worked for International Paper for 3 summers. I worked at their Eastover, South Carolina mill, which is near Columbia, South Carolina, for 2 summers. And then I also worked at Savannah, Georgia last summer, at their Savannah, Georgia mill last summer. And then my last work experience was with Cascades Tissue. So I worked at a converting facility, which is kind of a unique internship experience where they actually turn the jumbo rolls of tissue made at the actual paper mill into what you see in the store. So there are definitely a lot of different experiences that you can get within the program as far as that goes. And then after I graduate on December 4th, I will be working for International Paper at their Eastover, South Carolina mill. And I'm super excited about that because literally everything you do up to that point is for this moment, to graduate and hopefully get a job in a career that you love. And then what I like most about NC State, I really enjoyed the fact that you can find a community for anyone here because it is such a large university. And so I was able to find my niche pretty soon off after being on campus. I really enjoy the fact that the paper science program is small and close knit, because you can literally have resources and classes that may not even pertain to paper science, but you know people there already because of this program. And so that's super unique.
Hi, everyone. My name is Andrew Chu, and I'm a junior from High Point, North Carolina. Like everyone else, I am pursuing the dual degree. Currently on campus, I'm the president of TAPI, which is, we basically hold events with companies. Companies come in and they basically educate us about what they do. And then most of the time they interview the day after in our own building. Other than that, I'm also on the executive board of AICHE, which is the professional organization for chemical engineers. And most recently, I am now serving on the web committee for Service Raleigh. So there's a lot of service opportunities, and it's every year. And besides this, I do my best to help PSC recruit students. With regards to my work experiences, I've spent 3 months as an undergraduate researcher here at NC State. I've also spent 8 months this past spring and summer working as a process engineering intern at West Rock near Richmond, Virginia. And that was a linerboard mill. And then for the summer of 2021, I'll be working as a technical sales intern with Nalco Water, which is a part of Ecolab near Charlotte, North Carolina. And Ecolab is basically a chemical supplier to the paper industry. And then another thing to keep in mind, guys, most of these are paid, if not all of them. And a lot of times companies help you pay for housing, and a lot of times they also have houses near their mills, so you don't have to pay for anything. Reasons to be at NC State, there's like so many. Like I've made so many good friends being here in PSC and chemical engineering. All the professors are amazing, and since, like Ms. Piercy said, we have smaller class sizes. I mean, I think pretty much all professors know like everyone's name in their class as well. And then there's also so many professional development opportunities. Like we have our own engineering career fair. And then as PSC, we also have our own paper science engineering career fair. And then lastly, I would say, even in a pandemic, companies still want to hire PSC students. A lot of people had their internships canceled, but a majority of paper internships are still in place, and a lot of companies fulfilled them. And that's pretty much all I have.
Thank you, Andrew. Yes, as you guys were talking, I was kind of looking at the chat to see maybe what we missed, and then it made me think. So thanks, Andrew, for mentioning the paper industry career fair, because I did not even talk about that. Yeah, so a lot of things were virtual this fall, which was different, but we did have our virtual career fair, and NC State Career Services told us we could expect about 50% of the attendance from previous years, but we had about 80% attendance from previous years. So our industry is still out there and hiring. So one thing I will just follow up a couple of things from the chat, but feel free to keep putting questions in there and then we'll address them. Someone asked if you had already applied to NC State, could you change your intent? The answer to that is yes. That is probably how every single one of the 4 current students on here, maybe, I think, I don't know, it depends. I got them, they were changing their intent after they'd already applied, or they were already here as a chemical engineering student like Andrew. But yes, but I'll send an email out tomorrow because I have one contact that I work with in admissions, and it's as simple as the student has to do it from the email that they have on their application and ask to change their intent either to paper science or to paper science chemical. Now, one unique thing about NC State's engineering first year program is all applicants are looked at the same for admission, and this year it is test optional. So once you're admitted, you could be paper intent, paper chemical dual, chemical civil, computer, doesn't matter. The thing that dictates the program you matriculate into after your freshman year is your performance your freshman year. It's meant to be an exploratory program. So you could say, we've had students start in paper and decide they want to be electrical. And as long as they meet the grade requirements, they can matriculate into electrical. We've had students start in biomedical and want to matriculate into paper. So that is something that is very common and that happens. So really your intent when you're applying isn't that big of a deal, because you still have all those options available to you. Because testing is optional this year, our scholarship merit-based process will be done without test scores, because we cannot ensure equality with some people who have test scores and some people who didn't. I mean, that's just not fair. So for our merit-based scholarship, we will be looking more at not only the GPA, but the classes that you took. We're really thinking that if NC State thinks you're a good enough candidate for engineering, you already have the merit. But I will tell you the essays will be important. It's not important that you have 10 activities, but it's important that you have a few things that you're really passionate about. So we will be looking to figure out who is that whole you, not just the GPA test score you, right? So that's something that will happen this year. Somebody asked, any students have ever not graduated due to not having a co-op? I don't know of anybody. I've been here 9 years and that's never happened. We will work super hard to make sure that happens. Now, the only thing where we've had to do some very interesting things is with varsity athletes. So if you're thinking of being a varsity athlete, then that's a whole nother conversation, but that can be done as well. I think the students answered the internship locations and they talked about, you know, where they are. Some of them, yes, are in rural areas because paper mills require not only a lot of land, but they need to be in what we call a wood basket. This is why our industry will never go overseas. China does not have a southern pine tree that makes long, strong fibers for boxes and very strong paper products. So that's something we work very hard to make sure our students do. Someone did ask about the small number of students admitted to paper. The way the engineering first year program works is you spend your first year taking a core curriculum of classes, then you make a choice at the end of that first year. Generally, it's happening in 2 semesters, but you do have 4. And as long as you meet the GPA requirement for that program, then you can apply for that program to matriculate. And apply is the wrong word because it's not like a college application. It's really just a selection. And if something happens and your GPA is a little low, then we have strategies, course retakes and drops and things we can do to work with you. So I would worry less about the supply and demand of it right now, and worry, what we tell our students is your job in that first year is to be an academic rock star. Now, we will define what rock star means from high school to college, because there's a big difference. But your job, because if you come to me and say, I want to be a mechanical engineer, and they happen to have a fairly high GPA requirement after that first year, I want you to have that GPA. I want you to be able to choose the program of your dreams. We do have a kind of a tenant. One of our diversity tenants is out-of-state students. So someone had asked about out-of-state students. At NC State, because we're a public land-grant institution, we're capped at 18% for the entire university, but our goal is 25% or more in our program. And 25% of our 200 students isn't going to move the needle on NC State's, 18% cap. I think right now we're at about 23%. And then someone asked, could we shed a little bit more light on TAPI that Andrew talked about? So that stands for the Technical Association of the Pulp and Paper Industries. It is our global, international networking and professional education organization. So as an adult, I'm a member of TAPI. I serve on the Women in Industry division, actually lead up a committee within that division. I also serve on our what we'll call our student services committee, where all the paper schools in the US are thinking up different events and ways to bring our students together and give them professional development. But schools can have student chapters. So we have a student chapter of which you heard Andrew say he is the president of, and they do corporate relations, they do social activities, community service, things like that. And usually in that first year, we're having conversations with students about limiting their extracurricular activities. And my kind of standard advice is one professional, which our students must join TAPI their first year, one personal development or leadership. You know, what is that going to be for you that's going to help you develop personally and in a leadership capability, which could be, you know, like Claudia's dance marathon that she has led, and Brianda's Greek involvement. You've heard many examples. And then one, something you do for fun. And it doesn't have to be a club, but it could be working out with a group of friends or something that purely is kind of stress relieving and fun. So we usually tell students to kind of start out slow and then build. So I think that was a lot of stuff, but it was some of the stuff that I had written down there. So the only other thing I see is, do I think the class of 22 will have the option of test optional? Right now, NC State's policy is that this is for the class of 21 only, and that's all they're saying. So we don't know. I would not count on that, just because if you count on that and it's not test optional, you're kind of behind the curve. I would go ahead and plan for it. And then, you know, if it doesn't happen, that's the better scenario than planning for it to be test optional and not having taken any test and it's not. So what other questions? You guys are welcome to put them in the chat. Yeah, I wish I knew the answer to that question. What are the chances that campus will reopen for on-site visits in the spring? I know our university leadership is working very hard to bring more of our students on campus, living on campus, and doing so in a safe way. We personally are working very hard to find a way that we could host students just for paper science and engineering visits. I don't know what the campus is thinking, because a lot of that is also governed by what the state of North Carolina is doing and what the quantity of people we can have inside and outside. So I wish I could answer that for you. Pandemic affecting the industry. It's sort of like a tale of two stories. So clearly some of our companies that make what we call uncoated free sheet, so copy paper, office paper, people aren't in the office, right? That's on a decline. We had a corporate partner that formerly had a facility manufacture copy paper in Tennessee. They are repurposing that machine to liner, I think, which, as Andrew mentioned before, liner board is something that ends up going into boxes and packaging. So there are sectors that are not doing so well. Newsprint is another, but it's been on the decline for quite some time and will eventually go away, right? I mean, we don't really need newspapers anymore because you get it on Twitter or wherever you get your news. But food packaging, boxes, think of how many people are shopping online now. Think of how many more people are going to the grocery store because they're not going out to eat. So anything that has to do with packaging, and of course, when all of this started, all the rage was, where can you find toilet paper? Now, that was interesting because at-home toilet paper you couldn't find, but industrial toilet paper that would be in your office, or the toilet paper they put in the universities, for example, right? So that was not the stuff that, you know, we had a high demand for. So that demand kind of fell a little bit and the at-home products rose. So that's how the pandemic is affecting. So tips when applying for scholarships, I would say be authentic, pay attention to your essays. If something is an essay and then it says optional out beside of it, it's not optional. Write something, because if Daniel and I apply for the same scholarship and I skip that question, but he writes something, it doesn't matter what he writes. Of course, unless it's offensive, don't do that. But if he writes something that already says he's put more effort in, right? That already makes the reviewer think that he's put more effort. And oftentimes students will say, well, what should I write? Have two peers look at your application. Your peers know you very well. and say, what's missing? What is not in this application that people need to know about me? Make sure you write your essays. Scholarship reviewers, believe it or not, can tell within 2 sentences if an essay was written by or heavily edited by an adult. So I'll tell you that. So yeah, Andrew answered international paper is one of our largest partners. Probably that's the place where most of our alumni work. I think 12 to 14% of our alumni population is employed by international paper. Next is Westrock, then probably Georgia Pacific, then Domtar. Is longer better than when writing a scholarship essay? What we say is say what you need to say. Don't, put all kind of things around it just because you feel like you have to go up to the max words, but 1 or 2 sentences probably is not good either. So if you've conveyed your point in less than 500 words and it calls for 500 words, don't feel like you have to put them in there, because scholarship reviewers are generally reviewing hundreds. So just be concise. Don't worry about getting 499 words, but don't write just 1 sentence either. And Andrew did answer, thank you for in the chat about tuition. One of the things that people don't understand is that if you are taking courses online and those courses were developed to be online, yes, they are less expensive because that's the business model for those classes. For those of us that are having to pivot our in-person classes to online classes, it's not the same. And we are actually working so much longer and so much harder to be able to develop content that's never been online, that's always been in person. So that's kind of the reasoning there. Yeah, so Andrew thanks for putting in the chat about chemical sales personnel. Anybody brave enough to answer or to ask a question not in the chat? Or anything that current students want to add that maybe we've not covered?
One thing that I think is important to point out is that a lot of people think if you're going into paper science and engineering, you're stuck in the paper industry and that's your only option. But when you get the paper science and engineering degree, especially if you're also getting the Chem E degree, then you have so many options. And Jennifer talked about that some, about all the kinds of things our graduates do, but you aren't pigeonholed into the paper industry if you decide that's not necessarily your thing, or there's some other things you might want to go do that interest you more. However, the experience you're going to get in the paper science program is really going to set you apart from the people in other engineering programs. Because someone mentioned in the chat, or asked in the chat whether or not the internship requirement extended to all of engineering, and it doesn't. In a lot of engineering programs, there are a lot of people who don't have that experience and haven't been out in the field. And when you have that really good work experience, that's going to set you apart no matter what you go on to do after you graduate.
Yeah, just to add on to that, I mean, as freshmen, we have so many freshmen being interviewed by companies before they have even finished 1 semester in college. And I would say that if companies had to choose for a full-time offer between someone who has 10 months of experience and like a 3.5 GPA and someone with no experience and the higher GPA, they'd probably take the person with experience.
So to answer a quick question, someone said they don't remember seeing the paper science and engineering as an option. So when you're choosing your intents, it's listed as engineering first year. Now you do have to be on fall entry. So engineers are not admitted for spring entry. So make sure your choice on that Common or Coalition app is fall entry. And then it'll say engineering first year. I think the first one is aerospace because it goes alphabetical. So then you'll go down and you'll see 2 paper science ones back to back, because one is engineering first year, paper science engineering intent, and then one is engineering first year, paper science and engineering / chemical engineering dual intent. But either one of Either one of those doesn't, I mean, it doesn't really matter. And then someone asked, which university is number 2 in the US? I'm guessing that means paper schools behind us, and I could make some people mad. That's hard for me to judge. The schools that offer it are SUNY ESF in New York, University of Wisconsin, Stevens Point, Western Michigan, Miami of Ohio, and then there's some other programs that offer concentrations. We are the largest by more than double in North America. So the next largest program has about 80 total students. And if you did already apply, remember, I'll send you guys an email tomorrow and tell you the admissions counselor to send an email to that says, hey, you know, my name is Jennifer Piercy, date of birth, here's what it is from your email. I'll give you guys explicit instructions. I would like to change my intent from chemical to paper science and chemical. And usually I also instruct you guys to copy me because I kind of keep track of it. And I did put in the chat, don't forget to fill out our form. I had put that in the chat, go.ncsu.edu/CNR majors info, and then go.ncsu.edu/PSE events. And these will all be in the follow-up email tomorrow. So if you fill out that form, you'll get an email from me tomorrow. And the PSE events has our YouTube channel, virtual tours, my contact information. And if you have more questions, we want to talk up, you want to talk about one-on-one, please email me. Give me a call or anything. I'm happy to do that. And again, another question about how many students are admitted to our program. So students in general are admitted to engineering first year, and then they matriculate into our program after year 1 at NC State. So traditionally, we actually end up with more students in our freshman first year class than applied and were admitted, because like many of you, you got this email because you have already applied for chemical or undeclared. So every year that goes up and down. I have no clue how to judge that this year with the pandemic, but we will end up with more students in a freshman class than were applied and admitted to paper science, just because we do share our information with the chemical and undeclared students. Our freshman class the last 3 to 4 years has been 35 to 40. Oh, that's a great question. Exploratory studies. So exploratory studies is a 1-year program at NC State. It is a wonderful program that helps educate you on all the different majors at NC State. So exploratory studies is actually another very viable way to enter into an engineering degree program. And we have students every year that come out of exploratory studies choosing paper science. You do not need to change your intent by November 1st. Students can change their intent even after they're admitted. Now, you can't change your major. You can't apply and be admitted for business and then decide to change it to engineering. But if it's an engineering intent, they don't care. The average GPA that NC State is looking for, I have that. Let me pull it up really quickly. Trying to figure out where. I don't like to quote that off the top of my head. So for NC State in general, this will be the average from this year's freshman class and the mid 50%. The average weighted GPA was a 4.28 and unweighted was a 3.83. Now the mid 50% range on that was a 4.15 to a 4.47. And then unweighted 3.69 to 3.96 was the middle 50%. So 25% of those are going to be higher, 25% are going to be lower. So that's the average. But again, NC State really does try to look at that total student. So looking at your activities and your essays and your major of choice and kind of your passion. And one of the important aspects for engineering is what classes did you take in high school? Did you challenge yourself with your high school's hard math and science classes? Does NC State recalculate GPA for AP and honors classes? To the best of my knowledge, the way this works is they have a school profile on your school and they know what type of grading scale it is. Is it a 7-point or a 10-point? You know, are APs worth 5 points on the GPA scale or 6? Because some schools they're worth 6, and they know all that, and they do try to recalibrate that for equality, you know, to compare apples to apples. So there's lots of comparison methods that they use. And I know because my kid's school does the 6 for the AP, right? So, you know, my kids think that's the best thing. And I'm like, no, because they're recalibrating that to match the schools where an AP is worth an A is worth a 5. So trying to look at that total student and be really mindful of how do we think this student would fit into the major they chose, the NC State community? You know, we want it to be a match for you. We want to find, you know, great contributing members. So again, it doesn't mean that you have to be involved in 18,000 different things. I did hear an admissions counselor once tell me, it was at another school, but I think NC State shares the same perspective. An applicant they were looking at had 0 outside activities. 0 outside activities, 0 work experience, but they could not be more thrilled because in the essay the applicant wrote about the dad that worked 2 jobs, the mom that worked 2 jobs, and this applicant was the primary caregiver for their 2 younger siblings. They got them up in the morning, they fed them, they got them to school. Then they got to do a little homework before they had to go back and pick them up and feed them dinner and take them to their extracurricular activities. So in that essay, that applicant expounded upon what their daily life was like, and it had been that way for 3 or 4 years. And work experiences, things like that are all, you know, very important and relevant. So I do want to be cognizant of everybody's time. If you need to hop off, make sure you fill out that form so you can get an email from me, or you can send me an email. But I'm happy to stay on if anybody has any last minute questions. Happy to do so. But thank you guys for joining us, and a special thanks to Daniel, Claudia, Brianda, and Andrew for spending their night with me. So there's a question in here, you guys. What positions will you guys be at work? I'm assuming that means job title. If I'm wrong, Stuart, just let me know.
So a typical starting job for a PSC graduate would be a process engineering role. And that's where you look at the papermaking process and look for ways to improve it. If anything goes wrong, you can help to troubleshoot that. But your main role is to go through and find cost savings opportunities to help improve the papermaking process.
And I did put the link to the form again in there because someone asked about that. And what do you think, Claudia? What is your position title going to be with Solenis?
Yeah, so I'm a chemical sales, I guess it's technical sales. I'm a little bit different because I'm part of their like intro program. So it's called a STAR program. So I'm going to be a regional position. So I'll travel through North and South Carolina for a year and then get assigned to an account, eventually as like a sales account manager.
And sometimes that means in her role, she might have an account that's one company and multiple different mills, or one company, one mill, or 2 companies, 2 mills. I mean, it varies throughout the course of a position like that.
Yeah, so this summer when I was an intern, I traveled to like 2 or 3 other mills. Yes. I do need something like that. But yeah, I'll be traveling to multiple mills assisting with chemical trials and other fun stuff.
Other questions?